Leading a startup team, whether you're delivering a sugar rush, stocking coffee, or getting a regular delivery of snacks, Office Depot has solutions that fit every startup culture, from getting those first business cards and stationery to ordering fleece pullovers with your new logo. To learn how Office Depot and the California Technology Council have partnered to bring you savings on all of these startup essentials and more, go to californiatechnology.org/member benefits. I'm Daniel Levine, and this is the Bio Report. As the year draws to a close, we continue what's become an annual tradition and look back on the year in biotech and ahead to the J.P. Morgan Healthcare Conference and beyond with Adam Feuerstein, senior biotech writer for Stat News. Adam tries to make sense of a puzzling year for biotech that seemed full of contradictions, offers some thoughts on the highs and lows of the past 12 months, and discusses what he'll be watching for during the J.P. Morgan Healthcare Conference. Adam, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Danny, I feel like we do this every year, right? This
We
is like,
do this
one
every
in
year.
a series.
I can tell it's Christmas now.
Exactly.
Well, we're going to talk about the year that was in biotech, the good, the bad, the ugly, and what's in store in the year ahead. Let's start with 2018. A year ago, I think the mood was pretty good. Lots of money and innovation, a tax package that was going to boost stock prices, an FDA that was taking steps to lower barriers to approval. And yet, for the year, the biotech indices are down. As you kids on the Twitter machine would say, WTF. How'd we get here, and where exactly are we?
Yeah. WTF exclamation point, I think, is where we are. All those things that you said kind of happened, right? I mean, the sector was awash in cash, like lots and lots and lots of money pouring in to, particularly on the private side, record numbers of IPOs, record numbers of drug approvals. The kind of the science side of biotech seems to sort of kind of march on, but yet, like you said, Danny, and well put, is the stocks are crashing essentially. I mean, as we you and I are talking on the Friday before Christmas, and it's like every single day the market is down. Now, a lot of that is tied to sort of macro factors, right? So, the overall market is getting hammered, and so it's taking biotech stocks down with it. But even before that, we've had this significant downturn in biotech stocks that basically started kind of towards the end of the summer, and this kind of just continued, and it has not stopped. So that will sour the mood heading into J.P. Morgan.
Well, you mentioned it was a big year for funding, a strong year for IPOs. I think the topper is Moderna. What do you make of the Moderna IPO and its valuation?
Well, I think on one side you can say that the fact that they went out public at an extremely high valuation, they were able to do that, in the beginning of December, amidst all of this kind of market turmoil, kind of shows the strength of the offering. It certainly helped that they had 10 investment banks supporting the IPO. Since the deal went out and priced, the stock has gone down quite a bit. So they've broken price, and it continues to fall along with everything else. So what does that say? Is there a broader story there? And it may be just that investors are sort of exhausted when it comes to IPOs, and I think that maybe the IPO window is, if it's not fully shut, it's almost completely shut, and we may see sort of a pause in biotech IPOs starting in 2019, which, honestly, Danny, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. There have been so many new companies gone public in 2018 that, personally, I can't keep track of them all, and I've talked to investors who have the same problem. There's too many companies out there, and in some ways that's good for entrepreneurship, and it's good for, it shows you that there's lots of interesting science going on. But from an investment standpoint, it's just hard to keep track of all these companies and what they're doing, and I think that reflects, that's reflected in kind of the underperformance of a lot of the biotech IPOs of 2018.
I think overall M&A activity failed to excite investors, and the tax package didn't translate into unleashing the buying power of big pharma and big biotech. Is that going to change in 2019?
Well, I think what ended up happening, and it was sort of everyone's fear, is that the tax packages that were legislated into law this year. What companies ended up doing is just buying back their stock. Right, we saw a record amount. I don't know if it's a record amount, but we saw a significant increase in the amount of share repurchases, across a lot of industries, but particularly in biopharma. And so all that money that they saved on taxes, they ended up buying back their stock. They didn't end up buying a lot of smaller biotech companies, which is kind of what people expected or wanted to see. So I would agree with you that kind of M&A was a disappointment in 2018. It certainly never got to the level that people thought it would, a year ago. Whether that changes in 2019, I don't know. My crystal ball, I have no idea. Valuations are certainly a lot lower right now, which sort of suggests that, companies that still have a lot of money to spend can now buy companies a little bit less, they're less expensive. But at the same time, it's hard because I think from the companies who had valuations that were at super high valuations last summer now are looking at maybe being taken out at lower prices, and that's sometimes hard for the seller to kind of stomach.
Going into 2018, it was going to be the year of immunotherapy combinations. Any winners emerging in your mind in that regard?
No. They were all losers. I think it was we've talked about this internally at Stat. We were talking about this, and it was a tough year for cancer immunotherapy. Other than kind of the CAR T approvals were great, but the launches of those the sort of cell therapies for cancer have been lackluster. And then kind of on the solid tumor side, cancer immunotherapy, the whole idea that we're going to sort of have these combination therapies that are going to bring immunotherapies to more patients, more effective therapies, just has not. It just didn't materialize, I think, in 2018 the way people had hoped it would. The data just seems sort of lackluster. The biggest failure in 2018 was, Insight's IDO inhibitor, combined with Keytruda. That big phase 3 study failed. And then, since then, we just haven't seen anything that's gotten people really excited. So, it's not dead. I mean, it's not like at the end of the story, and obviously, we'll see a lot more data. It's just one of those things where 2018 just kind of fell flat.
Well, to get on this call, one of the things I had to do was put down the ICER report on spinal muscular atrophy that just came out. This was one of the exciting developments of the past year, the progress with gene therapies. We've had controversy over the pricing of drugs like Biogen's Spinraza generated with its high price tag, but we've got Novartis now moving towards an approval with a gene therapy quite possibly in the first quarter of 2019. That could blow the doors off previous pricing discussions. Where do you see that going?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about, with the Novartis product, pricing, maybe $2 million, maybe as much as $4 or $5 million per patient. These are one-time treatments. That's going to be tough to handle. And that's the conundrum with these gene therapies, right? They're miraculous treatments in some respects. They're life-saving, they're life-changing for a lot of patients with rare inherited diseases. But how we pay for those, how we pay for gene therapy, how we pay for cellular therapies, is still very much up in the air. And like you alluded to the ICER report on SMA. even if these things are kind of deemed to be cost effective, because of sort of their life changing, the ability to kind of save a life, especially when it comes to SMA with infants or young children. Cost effective doesn't mean that they're going to be affordable or that we're going to be able to sort of figure out how to pay for these collectively. And that's the struggle. And I think you just have to watch what happens, through 2019 to see, because as more of these gene therapies make their way through clinical trials and ultimately get approved, it's a big open question. But how we kind of deal with that, I don't think anyone's quite figured it out.
ASH is not too far behind us right now. Was gene therapy the big story out of ASH this year?
Gene therapy is always kind of a big story, especially as it sort of relates to kind of blood diseases like beta thalassemia and sickle cell, and that continues to progress. Maybe the bigger story for me out of ASH was kind of the rise or the sort of the coming out party of the bispecific antibodies, and these are kind of a different way of attacking cancer, and sort of seen as kind of a competition to CAR T, potentially, maybe easier to manufacture, potentially cheaper. There are definitely some pros and cons there, but you saw a lot of interesting data coming out on bispecifics from multiple companies, and I think that's something to watch.
The threat over price controls has long been an annual issue for the company, for the industry. I think the industry has learned to ignore many of the proclamations made by Trump, but we've got Democrats taking control of the House, a long list of progressive presidential candidates looking for headlines. Is this going to become a point of vulnerability in 2019 finally?
Yeah, I think the whole pricing thing is definitely an overhang. It remains an overhang over the industry. Look, the midterm election, Democrats basically ran on a healthcare strategy, sort of fears of having people's healthcare taken away. Drug pricing is part of that. So I think the fact that the Democrats took the House, you'll probably end up seeing in January moving forward, you're going to see a lot of pharma executives dragged in front of Congress. And while that's kind of political theater, it does sort of create a concern. And at the end of the day, I think drug pricing is also a bipartisan issue, and I think we've sort of gotten used to, unfortunately, we've gotten used to, kind of partisan divide in Washington leading to gridlock and basically nothing happening. But, drug pricing is one of those issues that where, you've got Republicans and Democrats who both, to some extent agree. And so, if you could see sort of, you could sort of see the two sides coming together to draft legislation. And, certainly there are proposals that are out there, bills that have been proposed and submitted. So I wouldn't say that nothing is going to happen. I think that would sort of be foolish to believe that, that nothing at all will come of any of this.
Well, this, of course, is a time of year for Naughty and Nice list. You once again provided your poll on the best and worst biotech CEOs of 2018. The best this year, Vertex CEO Jeff Leiden took the top honors. What's the case for Leiden?
I think, Jeff kind of won. Jeff Leiden won Vertex. He won my Best Biopharma CEO of the Year award. Mainly because of the sort of the way that Vertex has executed in developing these sort of life-changing cystic fibrosis drugs. The latest triple combination regimen that passed through its first phase 3 study late this year and will be approved next year. With that and combined with their other products, they can potentially address basically up to 90% of all cystic fibrosis patients. And that's, and they've done it incredibly well with very few sort of setbacks or hiccups. And so for that reason, I think, that Jeff, giving him that award was well deserved. I think among sort of the largest companies, the largest biotech companies, Vertex has just performed exceedingly well.
And on the list of worst CEOs, Mark Ailes of Celgene won the dishonors. It's kind of amazing to consider that Celgene was not long ago a biotech darling among investors. What went wrong?
Yeah, you're right, Danny. And that's what strikes me about Celgene too is a perennial favorite, top performer among biotech companies, and then just to see them fall so far and so quickly is really shocking to see, how far they're down this year and just all the problems. And a lot of it just stems from poor execution and just the fact that there's this overriding concern at Celgene that that Revlimid, which is their market-leading multiple myeloma drug, is they are going to lose patent protection on that drug eventually, and people look at that company and they see this sort of basically this patent cliff, this revenue cliff coming, and there's not enough in the pipeline to replace the billions of dollars that are generated from Revlimid sales. And despite the fact that Celgene has been a prodigious partner company, partner with other companies, they've got drugs in their pipeline. It's not like they're doing horribly bad and all their drugs are getting they're failing clinical trials and stuff. But there's just not been enough, and the deals that they do, people are really concerned. And so, the stock has gotten really destroyed this year, and to the point where nothing that they do seems to matter on the positive side, and people are not happy with Mark Alice as their CEO. So he wins the worst biopharma CEO of 2018.
Yeah, one of the most interesting stories of the year to me was Amarin's success. I'm wondering if there are lessons there you would draw for other biopharmas.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely one of the better and more interesting stories of 2018. And I think the lessons there are probably, of persistence and just sort of sticking to it. There were probably times, 5 years ago or so, where Amarin could have just given up on their, on Visipa, which is, their drug that's derived from fish oil, and they could have just, been content to kind of sell it into the limited market for where they had approval. But yet, they sort of, again, they persisted, they persevered, ran a very large. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said they got good data. I mean,
they got good data. Well, ultimately, right.
Data.
But to get to that point, right, they had to spend a lot of money and run a very long and large clinical trial, and kind of just prove the doubters wrong, right? Because up till we saw the Amarin data this fall, basically every large clinical trial, cardiovascular outcomes trial of a fish oil type drug had failed, right? There was a preponderance of medical evidence showing that these types of drugs really were not going to provide significant clinical outcomes or benefit for patients. And so Amarin proved people wrong, or the doubters wrong. And so it definitely is one of the more interesting and kind of positive stories coming out of this year.
On the acquisition front, Stat got some attention when it snagged Matthew Harper from Forbes. That's good news for Stat, but to harp on kind of a theme of mine, I think we've seen a big loss in mainstream publications' ability to cover this industry and understand complex issues that affect a big chunk of our economy and everyone's everyday lives. What's your take on the state of journalism and its coverage of biotech and healthcare more broadly?
Well, given that I pushed internally to have Matt Harper join Stat, I'm particularly pleased that Matt is joining us.
But
and
you're
I think
a Yankee fan, and you've always had a Yankees mentality. I'm a Mets fan, so.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're owned by John Henry, who owns the Red Sox. So I can't really use the Yankees analogy too freely in the office. So I try to be sensitive to that. But I think look, I hear what you're saying. I think that there are plenty of places where healthcare is discussed. I'd like to think that at Stat we try to serve many different readers. We write for a general audience. We write for a sort of a more specialized audience. I think Matt is going to do a great job for us, and I'm really excited to have him start writing for us at the beginning of the year. So, as it relates to that, but I also think that, we have competition that has also strengthened. I think the Wall Street Journal has got a great team. Business Insider is a company that has really beefed up its healthcare coverage, and I think they've got a strong group of editors and writers over there as well. So, if you're kind of talking about whether you have free media versus, sort of paywalled media, that's a question of economics of the industry. And I think, for journalism, for a long time, we gave away our content, believing that advertising was going to pay the bills, and that's just not viable anymore. And as a result, we've had layoffs and newspapers shutting down. Stat, like other publications, have paywalls, and we believe strongly in them, and we believe that journalism isn't free and that it should be paid for, and that what we do costs money. And so we try to, we believe people should pay for it, and I think that the success of companies like Stat, we're growing and our subscriptions are growing, and I think that's a recognition that we're doing good work.
I also think journalism is healthier when it's paid for by subscribers rather than advertisers.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and I think that's why you have to you have to have a mix. And Stat has a mix. We have stories that are free. We have stories that are behind our paywall, and I think our subscriptions the number of subscribers we have is growing as a result of the fact that we have quality work and people are willing to pay for that. So we appreciate that.
JP Morgan's kicking off on January 7th in San Francisco. This is where the industry goes to see if it sees its own shadow. What are you going to be watching this year's conference?
Well, I joked on Twitter the other day that I thought that JP Morgan might want to have grief counselors and therapy dogs in the lobby of the Westin. I think everyone's going to gather there and be a little shell-shocked at kind of this turnaround. Unless there's sort of this miraculous turnaround next week in stock prices, that it's going to be a little bit of a dour move. It reminds me a lot of kind of 2016. Which was another year where, we entered the JP Morgan world, the beginning of January with stocks into free fall. And so, it's tough. So I think that's kind of the mood. The mood will be pretty grim going in, and then it all depends on kind of how companies position themselves for, in terms of their outlooks for 2019, and whether or not we hear a lot of interesting news, maybe some deals. Companies always tend to seem to sort of pocket something to talk about in that first couple weeks of January. So that could help kind of shift things around.
And Stat's going to have quite a presence this year. What should people be looking for?
Yeah, we're flooding the zone. We're flooding San Francisco with people. Yeah, so the entire Biotech team will be out in San Francisco for Stat, covering JP Morgan. So it'll be me and Damien, Rebecca, Matt will be out there starting out for us, and then Ed Silverman, who covers pharma for us, will be out there too. So we're covering it. We've got a newsletter, a daily newsletter. Our readout, a regular readout newsletter, email newsletter that goes out usually every morning will kind of be repositioned, and we put that on every afternoon to kind of give everyone an idea of what's going on. And then we're doing an event at the Biotech Showcase Conference on Wednesday afternoon. Rebecca, Damien, and I will be kind of just basically telling people what's happened during that week. And then there's also, I should say, a special Read Out Loud podcast that is being planned for the week of JP Morgan, so I would watch out for that. Hopefully we can make that happen, but if we do, it'll be pretty cool.
And the Stat Lounge?
And the Stat Lounge, right. So, Dandy, thank you. You're helping me out here. Right. So, and last year we had this great thing, like for Stat Plus subscribers, for our subscribers, we basically kind of had this sort of WeWork type space that our subscribers could kind of come and hang out to. It's close to Union Square, and it's just an place where you can come, charge your phone, you can have a meeting, you can just get some work done. And it was really popular last year with our subscribers, and so we're doing it again this year. And all that information on kind of how to sign up for that is on Stat's homepage. You can find that at Stat's webpage.
Adam Feuerstein, senior biotech writer for Stat News, known to his friends as @Adam Feuerstein. Adam, thanks as always.
Danny, it's Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. The Bio Report is a production of the Levine Media Group. To automatically download this podcast each week, subscribe to our RSS feed or through iTunes or other podcast manager. To join our mailing list, go to levinemediagroup.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop us a line or are interested in sponsoring this podcast, send an email to danny@levinemediagroup.com. Special thanks to Jonah Levine, who composed our theme music, and the Jonah Levine Collective, which performs it.